Fruit flies' microbiomes shape their evolution. Biologists observed distinct shifts in the genomes of fruit flies, fed different bacterial species after just 5 generations. The expression "you are what you eat" has taken on new meaning. In an experiment in fruit flies, or Drosophila melanogaster, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have found that adding different species of microbes to the fly's food caused populations to diverge genetically, racking up significant genomic changes in just 5 generations. In future work, the researchers will be flipping the script, testing to see whether changes in the fly's genetic profiles influence which microbes can gain a foothold in their microbiomes. And they'll also probe more deeply into determining precisely how the changing rare 10-million-year-old fossil unearths new view of human evolution. New study of an ape-like pelvis suggests human ancestors might not have been built like modern African apes. Near an old mining town in Central Europe, known for its picturesque turquoise-blue quarry water, Laerdopithecus. For 10 million years, the fossilized ape waited in Rudabanu, Hungary, to add its story to the origins of how humans evolved. What Rudabanu yielded was a pelvis, among the most informative bones of a skeleton, but one that is rarely preserved. New piece of Alzheimer's puzzle found. Scientists found 2 short peptides, or strings of amino acids, that when injected into mice with Alzheimer's disease daily for 5 weeks, significantly improved the mice's memory. The treatment also reduced some of the harmful physical changes in the brain that are associated with the disease. 2 years after discovering a way to neutralize a rogue protein linked to Alzheimer's disease, University of Alberta Distinguished University Professor and neurologist Jack Gimenez has found a new piece of the Alzheimer's puzzle, bringing him closer. Peatlands trap CO2, even during droughts. Scientists studied the 2 species of moss that make up the peatland. They discovered that in hot weather and drought conditions, one species resists, whereas the other is negatively impacted. In wet weather conditions, the opposite takes place. Peatland, however, survives in the end. Although peatlands make up only 3% of the Earth's surface, they store 1/3 of CO2 present in soil. Preserving peatlands would therefore limit the impact of future climate change. Although peatlands make up only 3% of the Earth's surface, they store 1/3 of the soil carbon trapped in soils globally. Preserving peatlands is therefore of paramount importance for mitigating climate change, provided that these vulnerable environments are not themselves threatened by global. Researchers mix RNA and DNA to study how life's process began billions of years ago. RNA world is a fascinating theory, but it may not hold true. The problem is that the ingredients, such as enzymes, to make RNA world work, just didn't exist on early Earth. For decades, chemists have tested theories for how life began on Earth. One hypothesis has caught the scientific imagination for years: RNA world. This theory proposes that prebiotic molecules joined up early on to form RNA, the molecules that carry instructions from DNA in organisms today. RNA world posits that once RNA formed on Earth, it began replicating itself and later gave rise to molecules. Fungicides is an underestimated hazard for freshwater organisms. Large amounts of fungicides, used in agriculture, leak into nearby surface waters. The effects of it on aquatic organisms are poorly understood and not specifically addressed in the EU regulatory frameworks with respect to the protection of surface waters. Scientists have found that pollution by fungicides can have unforeseen but far-reaching consequences for the functioning of aquatic systems, like indirect effects on the development of algal blooms. Fungicides are worldwide used in agriculture. Large amounts of applied fungicides leak into nearby surface waters. The effects of these substances on aquatic organisms are poorly understood and not specifically addressed in the EU regulatory frameworks with respect to the protection of surface waters. Scientists at the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries, IGB, have found that pollution by fungicides can have unforeseen but how nitrogen-fixing bacteria sense iron. New research reveals how nitrogen-fixing bacteria sense iron, an essential but deadly micronutrient. The findings are an important piece in the puzzle of how life deals with iron, a nutrient it cannot do without, but one it must also avoid having in excess. Researchers at the University of East Anglia have discovered how nitrogen-fixing bacteria sense iron, an essential but deadly micronutrient. This is an important piece in the bigger puzzle of how life deals with iron, a nutrient it cannot do without, but one it must also avoid having in excess. Not the hairstyle, but the content. Hair indicates whether wild animals were stressed. Scientists have now demonstrated that the stress hormone cortisol is deposited in hair of wild mongooses in Portugal and determined baselines for cortisol in these carnivores. It is now possible to investigate whether different habitats and changed living conditions, such as the return of the Iberian lynx, place a particular burden on the mongooses. While hair analysis has become routine in humans, for example for the detection of prolonged drug or medication abuse, it has been little used in animals to date. Scientists led by Alexander Azevedo and Katerina Jujino of the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research, Leibniz ISW, have now demonstrated that the stress hormone cortisol is deposited in hair of wild mongooses in Portugal and determined baselines for cortisol in these carnivores. Age, sex and storage time of the samples were reflected in the cortisol values, but not the season or reproductive status of the females. It is now possible to investigate whether different habitats and changed living conditions, such as the return of the Iberian lynx, place a particular burden on the mongooses. The results were microbiome may be involved in mechanisms related to muscle strength in older adults. New study suggests the gut microbiome has a role in mechanisms related to muscle strength in older adults. Researchers found differences in bacterial profiles of older adults, with high and low physical function, bacterial and strength differences in mice, colonized with fecal samples from the adults. A novel new study suggests that the gut microbiome has a role in mechanisms related to muscle strength in older adults. The work, led by researchers at the Jean Mayer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging, HNRCA, at Tufts, is available as a pre-proof in advance.